we kind of fumbled a little bit with the net and we couldn't quite get it in because it was tangled, and your heart rate kind of sinks a little bit. We were in P2, we could be fighting for the win here. And you kind of fumble a little bit with the net and you're 3 seconds behind in the pit stop. Hi guys, my name is Rianna Meara-Hunt. I am a 22-year-old Kiwi that has just moved to the UK to start the kind of journey of becoming a professional driver. I've just moved here about 2 months ago, and yeah, no, I'm really loving it so far. A little bit colder than New Zealand and Australia. So my racing highlight so far was in 2023. I raced in the SRO Championship in America with the harder racing. This was my first ever year in GT cars. So I was racing a GT V8 Vantage in the GT4 category. We had a little bit of an up and down year, and this was the last event of the year, so we really, really wanted to kick it off with a bang. It was actually at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, so a dream track to drive, a dream track to win at, kissing the bricks. So Hannah and I both actually had never been there before. So every track that I went to that year, I'd never been, but Hannah had. So it was good to be able to learn off her and kind of adapt off her data and video nice and quickly through the practice. But unfortunately, we didn't have this luxury this event. And we got to practice on the Thursday. And from memory, we only had 2 practices to learn the track. When we went out for the first practice, it was dry, and we both got about 3 laps in just because of the timing of it all. So we got about 3 laps to kind of learn the track, and we were hoping, we'd get the full practice before qualifying. And unfortunately, it got rained off because it was raining so heavy. So going into qualifying, Hannah and I had only done 3 laps on the circuit ever. And it was a little bit nerve-wracking, you're like, I'm up against, 30 cars that have all been here before. We really wanted to kick this season off with a bang, and we felt like it was a little bit against us, but we kind of had a clear head going into qualifying. We said, we'll just do what we can do, and we can't change the circumstances, and we're going to make the best of the situation. So how the SRO Championship works is that we both qualify. So we qualify for one of the 1-hour races each. Hannah went out first, and she put a massive lap together, putting us in P2 for our first endurance race. So, I kind of felt the pressure, I was out after her in the qualifying, I have to take up my game. And I qualified as P3 for the second endurance race. So it was a really, really good start to the weekend. Considering we didn't have any practice on the track and everyone else had been there before. So the track's got kind of a big bank section, as everybody knows, at Indianapolis, and that was probably my favorite characteristic of the track, really leaning on the banking, and then coming kind of onto the back straight, the camber kind of goes away and the car wants to kind of rotate a little bit. So it was fun pushing the limits there. We started our first endurance race, P2 in class. Hannah started the car.
Here comes the field out of turn 14, up onto the banking and onto this 5/8 of a mile front straightaway at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, into the VP acceleration zone and over the yard of bricks. There's the green flag. We are racing. Race 1 of the weekend for Pirelli GT4 America. Gray Newell looking super aggressive on the start, making it 3 wide mid-pack. The top 2 still side by side, and Travis super late on the brakes, trying to stay up alongside that Mercedes. Little bit of a twitch, that might leave him vulnerable to Kevin Boehm, who's on the attack.
And she kept it there for the most of her stint. She had a couple of good battles during it. It was a bit nerve-wracking watching it. But when we came in for our pit stop, we kind of fumbled a little bit with the net, and we couldn't quite get it in because it was tangled, and your heart rate kind of sinks a little bit. We were in P2, we could be fighting for the win here. and you kind of fumble a little bit with the net and you're 3 seconds behind in the pit stop. So we come back on track. I was in the car and, you know, I told, you know, you're in P1, let alone like the little pit stop fumble. I was like, okay, right. You know, you've got a 10-second gap. You know, you've got to manage this with 25 minutes of the race. So, okay, feeling the pressure, you're in P1, you know, you need to make this work. And through my head, it was kind of going a million miles an hour, but I was kind of telling myself, you know, just treat it like a practice. You know your braking markers. Just make sure you hit every apex and don't make that mistake. And there was a couple cars that I had to pass and lap, and, you know, lost a couple of seconds to the gap behind me. And the engineer's like, you know, come on, push. You've got a 7-second gap now. And I think there was about 5 minutes to go, and I could start to see them in my rear view mirror. And I was like, okay, come on, you just got to piece everything together. And that final lap, when they were like, you know, this is your final lap, they're right behind you, had to block them to, you know, not let them pass and make sure I was driving a little bit more strategically than they were. And it was a close last lap.
And now we turn our attention here to the leader in AM. Coming through turns 13 and 14 for the final time, the Kiwi, Rianna Meara-Hunt. She and Hannah Grisham are set to go to victory lane for the first time in 2023. Heart of Racing takes wins in both the Pro-Am and Am class. The Am win to Rianna Meara-Hunt and Hannah Grisham.
We were pretty much like this on the line, and I won. And it was the best feeling ever, you know, just piecing it together, dealing with the pressure and, you know, not letting the team down, not letting myself down. And we got our first win of the season, and that was the win that created history for Aston Martin and being the first ever female duo to win in the GT4 Vantage. So it was a really, really big moment for us, and the team was stoked. You know, you pull into the pits and everyone's cheering you, and you get the hugs and the congratulations and spraying the champagne on the podium. It was just such a cool event. You know, you feel the warm butterflies and the excitement from everybody else.
It was definitely a surreal moment, hearing Nate say P1, you know, crossing the line and with the checkered. Those last few laps were really hard. I was struggling with pace, but just managed to keep on, and no, it was amazing. We finally got our podium. We've showed pace all year, but we just hadn't had luck, and it's come today, so we're finishing the season off strong.
What a day for the Heart of Racing. Wins in both the Pro-Am and Am classes.
And then we got to kiss the bricks. You know, you win at Indianapolis, you get to go and kiss the bricks, and it was just a surreal feeling. The next day we had our second race, and everyone was like, hey, you know, you girls, your average pace is better than everybody else in the field. So we could do this again. I started the car and it started spitting on our outlap just to throw some more diversity in there. And there was a big crash at the first lap, and I had to actually cut the track to avoid it. So I dropped back a couple places. I think I was in 5th. And I was like, okay, all right, just kind of build back up, get back to the pack. And it took my first stint to get back to the pack, and I made 2 passes on the in-lap, so it was a bit cheeky of me. In-lap box, past these guys and kind of screwed them over a little bit. And then Hannah got in the car, and I think we were in a P4. And she just drove through the field. Like, we were catching these AMs, you know, a second a lap, and we were all like nail biter finish. She had to pass one car for the rest of the race, and we were winning. She didn't have any radio comms as well. The radio kind of messed up, so she didn't even know where she was, and she made this epic last corner move on the guy that was winning.
Dead in the Am class. For the second day in a row, Heart of Racing picks up the victory. Hannah Grisham with a great final stint wins the race for the Heart of Racing team.
Awesome stuff. Congratulations to those 2 girls, because they have not had the easiest of times. They've had flashes of brilliance and pace, but hasn't really come together.
And won us the race, and it was just the best feeling to be able to back up the win that we had the other day. It wasn't a fluke, you know. We showed so much pace, and we're good at what we do, and we just won the last 2 rounds of the championship.
Honestly, my stint was kind of just avoiding the carnage at the start. I had to actually take the escape road, so we dropped back a fair few, but we both drove really well. The car felt awesome. The team have done a really good job at the harder racing this weekend. They've provided us a car that has got us onto the top step both times, but yeah, hopefully we can come back next year and prove that we can do this every weekend.
You know, it was just a massive relief and a massive, like, secure feeling, like, you know, you can do this, and this is what you're meant to be doing. You know, it's your first year in GT cars and you're already making history. So it was a really, really cool way to send off the year with the harder racing, and I learned so much. But yeah, that was probably the highlight of my racing so far, and I want to do more. You know, I'm hungry to create more history for Aston Martin and myself.